Hi, it's Patrik from Intensive Care at Home, where we provide tailor-made solutions for long-term ventilated adults and children with tracheostomies by improving their quality of life in their own home, because we send ICU and pediatric ICU nurses into the home 24 hours a day. And we also provide tailor-made solutions for hospitals and intensive care units whilst providing quality care. So in last week's blog, I answered another question from one of our readers, Denise, who asked, can we advocate for her daughter that needs 24 hours intensive home care nursing because her daughter is on a ventilator with a tracheostomy? You can go and check out last week's question by clicking on the link below this video. In today's video blog, I want to answer another question from one of our readers, Ellen. And Ellen sends an email, and Ellen is in Melbourne, Australia, and she sends an email. Hi Patrik, my son has a tracheostomy and is in ICU. He does well without ventilation support for 12 hours with carbon dioxide or CO2 in the range of 37 to 47. My question is, can he be managed with BIPAP at home overnight? My son is 36 and he has a history of retaining carbon dioxide, which has improved over time. My son was diagnosed with ALS about 8 months ago. He walks with assistance with a cane, and he has been in the hospital now for 2 months. He went with low sodium, elevated CO2 up to 57 and elevated blood pressure. He was unmonitored for a while and passed out, and he had to be intubated on 3 different occasions before he went into ICU long term. Hence, with the ventilation, he also got hospital-acquired pneumonia with Klebsiella and Pseudomonas. He got over it in the end. He had a tracheostomy about 2 months ago, and he's doing well without a ventilator now for over 12 hours. The ICU feels he may need to stay in ICU for quite some time until he's completely weaned off the machine. I, on the other hand, believe that home ventilation and intensive care at home is appropriate with BiPAP instead. Please advise what your options are. Thank you, Ellen, for sending this email and clarifying your son's situation. It's, what the ICU is telling you is, very old-fashioned, and it's sort of, they're stuck in what they've been doing for decades and is clearly not working. Of course, your son can go home and should go home with intensive care at home nursing rather than staying in ICU for the next few months until he supposedly comes off the ventilator. Now, with ALS, I think there's a high chance your son may need ventilation for quite some time to come, as it's usually a progressive disease. Can BiPAP be done at home overnight? Absolutely, yes. We could also monitor his CO2 either with a monitor or even with blood gases that we could take from the ear. So there's a number of ways to manage your son at home safely, either with just overnight nursing care, but I believe your son will need 24-hour nursing care, because if he's stuck in ICU 24 hours a day, he will need ICU and intensive care at home 24 hours a day, and we can provide that for you. So the BiPAP will most likely get his CO2 down, because that's what BiPAP usually does. Now that it's 37 to 47, it's not too bad, but usually below 38 is better consistently. So here is where our model of care fits in really in this, with the ICU as well. Your son can't go to a hospital ward because the hospital wards can't look after ventilation and tracheostomy. So the only really option for your son to be weaned off the ventilator safely instead of in ICU is at home. We're sending ICU nurses into the home 24 hours a day, so we're basically providing an intensive care substitution service. That has a lot of advantages for the hospital and the ICU as well. An ICU bed costs around $5,000 to $6,000 per bed day. And we are slashing that cost to about 50%. Hence, the hospital and the ICU have an interest to get your son home as well. Now that improves his quality of life, of course. It improves your quality of life because you don't have to spend 24 hours a day in ICU. You can spend 24 hours a day at home with your son, and I'm sure there's other family involved as well. So it's a win-win situation, right? And now with the NDIS coming in, the National Disability Insurance Scheme funding nursing care, it's much easier to obtain funding as well. And again, it's a win-win situation because we're slashing the cost of an ICU bed by 50%. And furthermore, ICU beds are in high demand and the ICU needs the beds. So I think the next step really is go and call me on one of the top numbers on the top of the website, or send me another email to Patrik, Patrik, at intensivecareathome.com. Now, given that your son is only 36, there's also a good chance that, once he's at home, maybe he can do some work from home. Don't know what your son was doing beforehand, but, if he can use a computer, for example, there's also a chance that he might be able to produce an income again. We have seen all sorts of positive things with our clients happening once they're at home. You can't beat home, and ICUs can't offer what we can offer at home. And in terms of weaning, yes, that can be, your son might be able to be weaned, and we can achieve that if his condition allows. So that's my tip and my question for today. If you need help, if you have a loved one in ICU or in pediatric ICU, or if you're at home already and you want to get more support because your loved one might go back to ICU all the time because you don't have ICU nurses at home, please, again, give us a call on one of the numbers on the top of the website, or send me an email to Patrik at intensivecareathome.com. That's Patrik just with a K at the end. Also, if you're an ICU nurse or a pediatric ICU nurse with a minimum of 2 years ICU experience, please go and check out our career section. We are currently hiring ICU nurses and pediatric ICU nurses in the Melbourne metropolitan area, on the Mornington Peninsula, in the Warragul area, also in Sunbury. So we have vacancies for highly motivated and highly confident ICU nurses with a minimum of 2 years ICU or pediatric ICU experience, and ideally with a critical care certificate as well. Thank you for watching this video. This is Patrik Hutzel from Intensive Care at Home, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.